basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply, I developed modified unit analysis while studying Planck's energy equation. Okay, so I found kind of what I thought to be the flaw in the units of Planck's energy equation, and I ran across some papers. There's a Juliana Mortensen. Okay, Juliana Mortensen. Actually, came from her, so I want to make sure I give her credit because through studying her paper, I was able to kind of sort through all this stuff. Okay, so the first thing I want you to look at is this. Animation here. Okay, so basically what I'm doing is that what I want to do is I want to put the angular terms back into the unit analysis because they were kind of hidden. They were taken away in the past. The unit for cycle and the unit for like radian or degree or some other measurement that we use for measuring angles. So that language was completely taken out of unit analysis by convention. And so I want to put it back in. Okay, so you can tell here, so this is the relationship between the cycle, and the wavelength. Okay, so this kind of relates to, the circular wave that John Mackin talks about that we've been developing the software for would be sort of this circular wave here. And you can see the relationship to a propagating wave. And so once around the circle is one wavelength. Okay, so I want to focus on the cycle. So I want to show you how I put cycle back into the unit analysis. Okay. And I'm also putting radian. So I want to talk a bit about the radian because the radian is what physicists commonly use. They always want their measurements to be in radians. They're very this is the way they go. Electrical engineers use cycle and physicists use radian for their angular measurement. Okay. So, but to me, the radian is not special. The cycle is special because once around is once around is once around, right? But the radian is sort of an arbitrary angle such that the arc length is equal to the radius. Okay, so that is cool, but I don't think that is, it's sort of arbitrary as well. We could use degrees, we could use radians, we could use the gradient, which is 400, which divides the circle into 400 units. I could use something like I use at work where we take an encoder and it gets divided into 4096. So, there's 4096 pulses to make the motor turn once around. Okay. So the radian and the degree and it really depends on what you want to do. But the cycle is a cycle. So
that's clear, right?
We measure, when we do, so electrical engineers like the cycle, we'll do like RPM, and RPM is rotations per minute, not radians per minute. Like electrical engineer would never use radians. Okay. So my motivation is to focus on the cycle, but we do need to invoke the radian. We do need to invoke the radian in this discussion. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at Planck's energy equation and we're going to look at the units. There's two ways of writing Planck's energy equation, right? E equals hf with units of joule times second times 1/2. You're familiar with that. You've seen that a million times, I'm sure. And so the final units have to be joule, right? So then we have E equals h bar omega, which in the standard SI units has the same units, joules times second times 1/2. And this bothers me. It bothers me that these two equations have exactly the same units. Okay. So I feel like there's something missing here. When I look at this, it kind of looks like, the equation is unbalanced. Okay. So you have these two S's cancel, right? And this one doesn't have anything to cancel with to give us the units of joule. And so the physicist will say, oh, but joule times 1 is equal to joule, right?
Yes.
That's what they would say. And you would think that, and you go, yeah, that of course makes sense. But this is unit analysis. this is not the body of the equation. This is unit analysis. Unit analysis, the units have symbols. The symbols are placeholders for values, right? In the unit section, they're just placeholders for, you know, the actual information. Whereas so it is my opinion that we shouldn't be putting numerical values into the unit section and then using it as a numerical value. That bothers me. That makes me uncomfortable. Right? So the first thing I'm just going to do is I'm going to balance that one with another one. I can do that.
Okay. Yeah, of course.
Joule times S divided by 1 is still equal to joule times S. So I haven't done anything mathematically wrong here. But now, you know, I'm a Libra. I like when things are balanced. And this equation looks balanced to me now. So the 1 cancels the 1, the S cancels the S, and we end up with, well, with the units of the joule, which is, you know, which we want to end up with the unit of the joule. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite Planck's energy equation, and I'm going to expose the 2 pi parameter. Okay. So in order to do that, we have to write E equals H bar times 2 pi times frequency. So now we've kind of pulled that 2 pi value out from Planck's constant. The non-reduced Planck's constant. We have reduced Planck's constant times 2 pi times frequency. So what are the units of 2 pi? What are the units of 2 pi?
Well, I guess you would say that's a cycle, right?
Well, yeah, but okay. So the units of 2 pi are in fact radians per cycle. So 2 pi are the number of radians per cycle.
Right.
Okay. Right. So nobody's going to disagree with that. Literally, 2 pi are the number of radians per cycle, and this is how I put the radian and the cycle terms back into unit analysis. Okay. You kind of need both. Eventually, I can phase out the radian, but literally the units of 2 pi are radians per cycle. Okay, so let's just have a closer look at that. And again, I already said this, but one cycle is one cycle, is one turn, is one period, is one wavelength, right? So that's what a cycle is. And of course, a radian is only a fraction of a cycle. So a radian is in fact, 0.159155 turns.
Right.
Okay, it's a fraction of a cycle. Okay, so I just want to point that out as an obvious thing, but it's important in the way I'm trying to explain things. Okay, so now we're going to go back to we're going to do the units. Okay, we're going to do the units for this. So the units of reduced Planck's constant is is joule times second over 1, like we saw before. And the units of frequency are 1 over S, like we saw before. And the units of 2 pi are radians per cycle. So now the units aren't balanced again. The units aren't balanced again because the radian has nothing to cancel with, and the cycle. So I use a triangle for cycle. Just because it looks pretty. I like it. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out what symbol to use for that. I haven't come up with a symbol for radian yet, and I'm phasing out radian anyway, so I don't really care. So so next what we're going to do is make sure I have that there. Okay, so to balance the equation, the only way I can do this is to put the radian here where the 1 was. Before there was a 1 here, I'm going to put the radian here. I'm going to put the cycle here. So the units of frequency is cycles per second. That's what that 1 meant. So before we didn't really have a good idea of what 1 meant. Right? So one what?
I see what you mean.
Okay? Right? So so I put this is 1 cycle here. So cycles per second. The unit of cycles is cycle, 1 cycle. And the units of radians is 1 radian. And so now everything balances nicely, and we've got the radians canceling, the cycles canceling, the seconds canceling, we end up with joule. So everything works out. So that's how I put the angular terms back into unit analysis. They were hidden they were taken away. They were obscured, I guess, by convention, by some clever people that thought they were being clever by doing this. But unit analysis, in my opinion, unit analysis is what we use to interpret the equation. Right? So equations can be really cryptic. This is very cryptic, this equation, right? Equations are cryptic, and you figure out what the equation means by looking at unit analysis. So to me, unit analysis in terms of interpreting equations is extremely important. And we shouldn't be obscuring anything. We shouldn't be like leaving anything out.
Yeah.
And when you leave something out, you might be misinterpreting. It doesn't mean you're going to, but you might be misinterpreting the equation. Okay, so we're going to kind of take my little road trip here. This is kind of like down memory lane for me because I've been doing this for years and years, for a long time. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to group the 2 pi. First, we're going to group the 2 pi with the h bar, right? So when you group the 2 pi with the h bar, you get the E equals hf equation. Okay, and so h bar has units joules times second per radian, which we saw on the previous slide. Okay, the 2 pi parameter has units radians per cycle, and of course frequency has units cycles per second. And so then, so now Planck's constant has units joules times second per cycle. And this per cycle is what has been missing from unit analysis. Okay, so and of course, you know, so here the cycles cancel, the seconds cancel, you end up with joules, and everything kind of works out nicely.
Okay.
So no questions? That's good.
No, I think it's pretty clear so far. Yeah.
Okay, good. I knew you'd be the perfect person.
Well, you know, I've thought about these things a little bit before as well. Not in a detail, but it's obvious. It has to.
Like I've been doing this for years, and I've mapped it out like a million different ways. And this, to me, what I'm doing today, I think is the best that I've done so far. So I think this is going very well. So now we've got, now I'm going to group the 2 pi with the frequency term. Okay, so now we've got, so 2 pi times frequency is omega. So now I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. So the h bar has units joules times second per radian, as we saw before. 2 pi has units radians per cycle, cycles per second. So now you can see that, and then the cycles cancel. So now the omega term has units radians per cycle, which is exactly what omega is. It's the number of radians per cycle. Okay. So, you know, so you can write, that's how you get to the 2 ways of writing the equation. So I'm just going to show them both. I'm going to show them both together. So you got the E equals HF has joules times second per cycle times cycle per second. And, h bar times omega is joules times second per radian, radians per second. So the ones now become, or have a label. Right?
I can see why you like the top much better, of course. Yeah.
And the top is, but both are fine. Both are fine. Okay. So, so a number of years ago when I started doing this, I looked, okay, I keep thinking I can click there. Okay. I looked at Wikipedia under Planck's constant, and it said the following. Okay. So I'm going to read this a little bit. Okay. So confusion can arise when dealing with frequency or Planck's constant, because the units of angular measure, cycle or radian, or cycle and radian, are omitted from the SI standard. Okay, so in the language of quantity calculus, so in the language, the expression for the value of Planck's constant or frequency is the product of numerical values, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so the symbol for frequency, when used for the just the value of the frequency, are cycles per second, whereas the symbol for omega, angular frequency, is radians per second. So here they're admitting that the cycle term and the radian term were left out, and technically frequency is cycles per second, and omega is radians per second. So the numerical values of these two are different. They're different. They're by a ratio of 2 pi. So omitting, so I highlighted this. It said, omitting the units of angular measure, cycle, and or radian can lead to an error of 2 pi. Now, I also say removing them can lead to an error in interpretation.
Right.
Right. So, then it says a similar state of affairs occurs for Planck's constant, where h is used to express the value of joules times second per cycle. So they're saying it here, what I just said. And the symbol for h bar is supposed to have units joules times second per radian. So they're admitting this here, right? They both represent form, but they both have different values. Okay, so I think because they have different values, they should have different units. And historically, Planck's constant and reduced Planck's constant had the same unit 1 over s, or sorry, joules times second, but not joules times second per cycle or joules times second.
Right.
So interestingly, so this years ago I found this and I cut and pasted it and put it in my slide. This is no longer on the Wikipedia page. After I made my video, this paragraph got taken out. There it is.
Really?
I swear to God,
I cut comment on it or something. Can you?
I don't know. Like, I didn't comment on it. Like, I don't even know how to change a Wikipedia page. I don't have access or whatever. So I don't know. It was there. There it is. It's right here. I cut and pasted it and put it into my slide. And then just, when I was, I wanted to see if it was still there. When I was making this slide presentation, I looked, and this paragraph is not even there. In fact, the word cycle doesn't even appear on this Wikipedia page, this one up here.
It doesn't. The history. I think there's probably a way to look at the history. You can see who made those changes. That would be interesting to see. Maybe you could email that.
I think if we went to the Wayback Machine, we might be able to find this again. Would be interesting, to try. But it doesn't matter. I know I cut and pasted this from it. It was there, and now it's not there. So it's interesting that, I just found that interesting. I was shocked. I'm like, what? Was I imagining things? No, I wasn't. But anyways, so for some reason, people don't want to know about this, or they don't want it to be important. Or they don't think it's important, but I think it's important. I think that's a better way of saying it.
When you talk about the energy of a photon, it gets important because if you have h times the frequency, the meaning then is a different one, right? How much is it, that photon? I mean, it's basically 1 second's worth of light. That's, anyway.
Well, that's that is what it is, but then there's no such thing as a photon if you say it that way.
Exactly. So this kind of is important when we think about photons.
When we start getting to the quantum mechanics and we start getting to the John Macken's model, say, of the electron, this becomes very important. Okay, so let me just, so I prefer to do things in cycle. I think for obvious, maybe because I'm a woman and we know what cycle means, but
it's clear, right? At least it's clear what it means. So there's actually no disagreement. So maybe that's why
it's easy to visualize. Whereas radian, I find a little more difficult to visualize. So when John Macken says the electron is quantized by h bar, really what he's saying is the electron is quantized by the radian. Okay, so h bar, this is the way I like to say it because I'm a calibrator. I like to calibrate things. That's what I do with my systems at work. I showed you the system, picture of the system I'm working on, and I'm the calibrator because I write the software.
Right.
And so h bar is calibrated to the radian and h is calibrated to the cycle.
Yeah.
Right? That's the way I like to say it. Not quantized by. I think when you say it's quantized by, it makes it sound like it's more special than it is. You could also say quantified by. So h bar is quantified by the radian, and h is quantified by the cycle.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the way I'd like to say it, rather than saying it's quantized by. When you say it's quantized by, it means that something's special. There is something special. I don't mind saying it's H is quantized by the cycle because the cycle is easily quantized, like it's one thing. Whereas the radian is sort of a fraction of a cycle. It's like saying, what is the radius of a wave, right? The There's no such thing as a radius of a wave. So when you put the circle and the wave next to each other, I think it's easier to see that the radian is kind of nothing. Like not that's nothing, but you could use radian, you could use degree, you could use the 4096 division that I just talked about.
Like if you explain it to a kid, right? The cycle makes more sense. It's obvious.
Cycle is just, it makes more sense. So when I do modified unit analysis, I'm just going to use the cycle. And if you want to convert to radian, you can convert to radian. But in terms of talking about it, I want to deal with just the cycle. Okay. So, Planck's energy equation has units joules times second per cycle times cycles per second. And that's easy to visualize. I can visualize that. And so the implications of this are quite huge. So I'm going to take this a bit further, but wait, there's more. Okay, so what am I doing here? Okay, so here what I'm doing is I am grouping that term. So now we've got like this term here, right, which is the units of Planck's constant are joules times second per cycle, but I want to group the cycle term with the second term so the units of seconds per cycle is the units of the period, of the wave period, right? So now if you want to interpret Planck's constant in English, okay, if you convert this unit to English, it is literally translates to the energy of one period of light, right? Because of times and of, right? Of and times are the same. So when you say of, it's really times.
No, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's that. Right. Yeah, I've thought about this that thing because what's the photon? How big is a photon in quotes? Right?
Yeah.
Nobody can answer that question, and it's really I think a whole second's worth of measurement is basically what's happening, right? The way Planck measured it per second, it was 1 full second. So it's basically everyone who thinks it's like one wave hump, it's not.
No, it's not. It's not. So if you turn a light on and you run it continuously, this would be the energy that it would transmit in 1 second's worth of time. That's what this is telling you. This is the energy of one period of light, wave period, times the number of cycles per second, periods per cycle. Right? And so this makes it very clear that this is the energy of one period, one wavelength, one oscillation, one cycle, times the number of cycles per second. Right?
Yeah.
So, so this is not the energy of a photon.
Right? Exactly.
Right? It's not the energy of one thing. It's the energy of many things over a period of time, which happens to be 1 second.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to make this even more powerful, and this is pun intended, as you will see. I'm going to take the unit section, and this is something that nobody did before I did this, I'm pretty sure, because I never saw anyone else do this before. I'm just going to divide both sides of the unit section by the second. Okay, so I'm going to divide this by second, I'm going to divide this by second, and I'm going to end up with the units of power. Okay, so you can see that I'm going to cancel this S with this S, right? When you do that, and you end up with the same equation, only now it's a power equation.
Okay.
So you get power equals H times F. And so now the units of Planck's constant are joule per cycle, which is the same. It's the energy of one period of light, or it's the energy per cycle, per 1 cycle of light.
Okay. Yeah.
So the meaning didn't change, right? The units look different, but this is the energy of one period, and this is the energy per cycle, but they both mean the same thing.
Right.
It's the same value. They mean the same thing. And then, so now we have a power equation. And what's really interesting here is this maybe should have been the way the equation was written in the first place, because the black body experiments that were done in the past were wavelength against intensity, and intensity as units of power per meter squared. So the black body experiments were always reported in, or often, if not always, reported in terms of power. In terms of power. So my question is, how come the powers that be, pun intended again, wrote Planck's energy equation in terms of energy instead of in terms of power? They could have just as easily have done that. They would have gotten the same answer, only the answer would have been interpreted differently as a power term on a per second basis, which is what I was saying about the energy. It's on a per second basis. We would have clearly seen that, this equation here is on a per second basis. We would have known that for sure.
Have you seen the original paper? Maybe it's still in there. I don't know. I haven't actually read the original paper.
Of who?
Planck's work.
Oh, Planck actually had per cycle. Planck was onto it. He never wrote power. Juliana Mortensen actually did a lot. She wrote a lot of papers, and her papers were on Planck's papers. So I learned about Planck's paper through her because I think she speaks German and I don't. And so she went to the originals and then reinterpreted them. And he definitely had per cycle in his equations. I don't think he ever did H bar. I think it was always Planck's constant, and it was on a per cycle basis. So that's where she got her information directly from Planck. So yeah.
Okay. I should read it. I speak German. Maybe I should read it.
Yeah, you can read German?
Yeah, of course. I speak German. Cool. It's my main language.
I have German ancestry, but I can't read German. So anyway, so this is sort of what I came up with. And I actually, let me just see here. So there's another there's another power equation that looks very similar, that has very similar units. So power equals voltage times current, has units joules per coulomb per second. And my power equation here has units joule per cycle per second. So and they end up with the units of power. So, these two look very similar, these power equations, and the units also look very similar, which I thought was really interesting. Okay. And so I was able to use this approach. To do a real life example. I wrote a paper on it. We can look at this. You can look at this, at some other time, but I was able to use, actually, I can just quickly, let me just go to, I did write some code, and I'll just throw this up here so people can have a look at it. But I was able to use this. I call it the quantum of energy. So now Planck's constant is the energy of one cycle.
Okay.
So Planck's constant is the energy of one turn of the circle, or one wavelength of a wave, of a light wave, say. So it works for both John Macken's wave. It works both for this quantized wave for the electron, and it works for light. Okay. And so I'm able to use these quantum. There's also a quantum of momentum. So there's in modified unit. So now this is modified unit analysis. We have a quantum of energy, which is Planck's constant, quantum of momentum, which is Planck's constant divided by the speed of light. And then I also have a quantum of mass, which is the quantum of momentum divided by the speed of light, or you could say the quantum of energy divided by the speed of light squared, which makes this E equals mc squared. Okay, so it fits in nicely. It makes it, it's not as pretty as sort of the original equation for calculating the power of a laser, but in this example, so given a 5.16 watt laser with a wavelength of 726 nanometers, what is the force, right? And force is on a per second basis, right? Force is meters per second, it's on a per second basis. Or you could say momentum divided by second. Those are the units of force. So I'm able to go through this and calculate the force using this quantum of energy. So this quantum of energy, you can think of it as, this is the energy that one atom is putting out, right, for each cycle. So one atom, one cycle, then that's why light is quantized by Planck's constant, because no matter what the wavelength of light, the energy of that light is Planck's constant, one wavelength, wavelength of light, right? And so it's the frequency that gives a higher intensity or a higher energy. The higher the frequency, the more energy there is, and nothing.
You have more per second, right? I mean, it's kind of obvious when you think about it.
Exactly. Way, so it's not to do with the wave. So this is the part that bothers people. The wavelength of light of every wavelength is the same. It's the frequency that's different that gives higher, and it gives the higher energy.
Well, so it's like not the ocean waves. It's like when you say that the ocean, that one wave hits you. Well, that's like one unit of energy. When it hits you 10 times, well, of course it's more. You know,
you have more energy. You have more waves crashing on the shore every minute, every second, right? So I mean, it seems trivial when you think about it, but you wouldn't believe the arguments I had with people about this. No. There's a photon, like even like John Mack, and like we argued a lot through email about the photon, and he uses H bar and I use H, so we argue a lot. But he's actually
I heard that you guys are arguing about it.
He's good. Like he's okay though. Like a lot of people are, I'm gonna say, are a little mean or something, but he's good. Like he takes it all in stride, and he's good that way. But you know, he recognizes that I use H and he uses H bar, and he doesn't let that bother him. So that's good. So that's the power getting. So that's how I use unit analysis. But wait, there's more, a little bit more. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to split up this joule, right, into kilogram meters per second, meters per second. I like to write units like this. I don't like meters per second squared. It's easier to cancel things this way. It's easier to cancel things this way. So I kind of write, I kind of do it more redundantly, but I just like to write it this way. And I do that in my code as well. And so here, what we're going to do is we're going to cancel that S with that S. Okay. Here we go. Right. So we're going to cancel that S with that S. I keep forgetting which cursor is the one that you're seeing. It's the small one. Okay. So we're going to cancel that S with that S, and we're going to end up with these units. And these are the units of angular momentum. Right, in modified unit analysis. So these are the units of angular momentum. Let me see. Okay, my next slide. So the standard units of angular momentum are this, kilogram meter squared per second. And this is why I split out. So this is why I write kilogram meters per second, because one of the meters belongs with the per cycle, and the other one belongs with the units of momentum. Okay. So this literally translates to, the momentum of one wavelength of light. So in modified unit analysis, meters per cycle are the units of wavelength, right? Right. So it's in standard unit analysis, the units of wavelength are just meter, right? But it literally is the number of meters in one turn, in one cycle, in one wavelength, in one period of light, of whatever, whether it's hard light, which matter, or whether it's propagating light, which is light. So that's how we get to angular momentum. I literally put the angle back into the units. So these units always used to bother me. Like, how can these be the units of angular momentum when there's no angle in the units?
Right.
It bothered. Things bother me, and that bothered me. And so when I went through and did a modified unit analysis, this fell out, and I said, okay, now I get it. They just hid the angular, they hid the radian and the cycle terms. They turned them off. They converted them to the numerical value of 1, which I think is a mistake. I don't think you should put numerical values into the unit section. I think it should all be symbols. They should be symbols, and that symbol should represent something, not the numerical value of 1. This is something. This is what. This is one cycle, and this is something. Okay.
Okay.
So, so let's see what else I have here. Yeah, and so that's the point I want to make here is, that I put the angle back into. So one turn is the momentum of one wavelength of light. Right? Once around, one wavelength, one wave period, one oscillation, however you want to say it. So this is the, these units are so these are the units of Planck's constant as well. These are the units of Planck's, because I, got them from Planck. So these are so there's lots of ways you can look at Planck's constant, which is cool. It's either the energy of one period of light, it's the momentum of one wavelength of light, or in the power equation, if I go back to the power equation, it is the energy per cycle. Right. But it's all the same. It's just different ways of looking at the same thing. And so here's my modified unit analysis. So the units of frequency are cycles per second. The units of the wave period are the inverse of that. The units of wavelength are meters per cycle. And the wave number is the inverse of that. So the wave number is usually written like this. So there's the wave. I write the wave number like that. So I write wavelength like that, wave number like that, wave period like that, and wave frequency like that. And that's it. That's my
nice. Yeah, I totally agree. Actually, I mean, I'm trying to be critical, but it makes sense because I've thought about this too. So
yeah. No, I knew
foreign to me.
Yeah, I was hoping you would get it, but you've actually gotten it even better and easier than I even imagined. So this is wonderful. Thank you for letting me do my spiel. And I think this is going to be important in terms of the quantum mechanics that we're trying to sort out.
Oh,
absolutely. Because I don't want, so as much as I love John Macken's work, I don't like it when he says that the electron is quantized by H bar. Okay, if he said electron, his H bar is calibrated to the radian, and I don't think anything is like quantized in any special way and he's making it sound like it is a special thing. And so I don't really subscribe to, to even using H bar. In fact, I use H instead of H bar. And so this is where it becomes like, it's not a problem. I can do H and he can do H bar and everything's fine until we get down to the Planck natural units. That's where we run into trouble, because he uses H bar and everyone uses H bar in Planck natural units, and I use H. I end up with a different interpretation. So I say the electron is quantized by the cycle. Right? It's quantized by H, and H is calibrated to the cycle. Right. So, and it leads to a different numerology. And so, although the concepts are good, the concepts are sound, the concepts are right, it leads to there is a few gotchas in between. So I remapped all of John Macken's stuff to be H instead of H bar. And some of the values work out the same, and some of the values work out different.
Okay.
Right? So it's not a perfect isomorphism, say, between the way he's doing it and the way I'm doing it. So so then now we have to duke it out and see, whose numerology works out better. But
it helps with understanding, have this picture in your head, what it means, and then it gets lost if you just use, other.
It's more intuitive to me. It makes it easier for me to understand even what I'm doing. So
makes sense.
So I think this is kind of important. This might be important in talking about relativity as well. Right? But
I guess it could.